10 All Sports Central will be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it will be over the Kentucky Wildcats. And this is a team that went 8-5 in 2019, and of course it's a bit of a down season compared to how they were in 2018, but still, nonetheless, it's a great season for Kentucky. And today we're going to be going over whether or not they can continue that in 2020 and improve on it. We're going to be going over a few players that this team will be losing and returning, along with a full preview and prediction on every game on Kentucky's schedule. So yeah, with that, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for Kentucky. Of course, this team was 8-5 once again, and they were 4-4 between September and October, then 4-1 between November and the postseason. So this was one of those teams that was kind of like Virginia Tech and Tennessee in that factor, where they started kind of slow. I had a couple of really bad games at the start, but however, they really improved over the season, and I mean, that's pretty obvious by how their trends were. I mean, once again, 4-4 for the first couple months, and then 4-1 for the last few games. That's very impressive. So yeah, for Kentucky, of course, they had a couple of good wins in there too. They did beat Missouri on October 26th, 29-17. They also blew out their rival Louisville 45-13, not even close on that one. And then they beat Virginia Tech in their bowl game on New Year's Eve 37-30. So for Kentucky, once again, all around a great season, considering how many injuries this team had. I mean, people aren't really considering when they look at Kentucky how many injuries that this team had to deal with last season. I mean, if you look at 2018, this team was really good because, one, they had a lot of talent, and two, they just weren't all that injured. And I mean, in 2019, this team had a ton of talent too. It just was the injuries that really got to them. I mean, if you look at their quarterback situation last season, it was messy. Yeah, that's what we're going over next is the returning production. They lose their all-around quarterback from last season, Lynn Bowden. And of course, he was more of a running back than a passer in the first place. He had 403 rush yards or passing yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And so his passing stats were absolutely terrible. However, between his receiving and rushing yards, he had 1,800 total receiving and rushing yards, along with 14 touchdowns there. And so yeah, once again, I mean, he was an insane all-around player last season. I mean, he could do anything on that offense. I'm sure if he wanted to play offensive line, he would be able to even do that. I mean, yeah, he was quite a player last season, and the main reason why he was quarterback in the first place was once again because of their quarterback situation. Of course, Sawyer Smith, I mean, he was in there for a little while. He had 690 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, and of course, Terry Wilson was who was expected to be the quarterback from the start until he got injured. So once again, the injury situation for Kentucky was, I mean, it was quite brutal last season for this team. They do return their second rusher, Asim Rose. He's actually their first running back, and he had 826 yards and 6 touchdowns last season. And they also returned their running backs, Smoke and Rodriguez. Both of them combined for just right around 1,200 yards with 12 touchdowns last season. So both of them were great running backs too. And as you can see, I mean, it's pretty obvious this was a very much rushing team last season. They had a couple really good running backs, and when you got a rushing quarterback like Lynn Bowden, I mean, yeah, it was a great team last season for the rushing corps. As far as the receiving corps goes, they do not really have, I mean, they returned their second receiver in Ahmed Wagner. Of course, he didn't put up a whole lot of yards. He just had right around 250 yards, and I mean, they had a couple wide receivers that they used somewhat. I mean, Ali was another one that they kind of used, and he had just right around 200 yards. So I mean, yeah, once again, the receiving corps was not used a whole lot at all last season, and I mean, the main reason for that was because they did not have a very good passer under center. And once again, when you got basically a running back under center, you can expect him to be a big rusher. And the good thing is for Kentucky is that every single game, Lynn Bowden would have he would do a great job. I mean, he was only a rusher for a certain amount of time this season, and I mean, for him to do as well as he did during the time that he played, it was very impressive in my opinion. Once again, 1,800 rushing yards combined for a quarterback. It's very, very impressive in my opinion. As far as the offensive line goes, you lose 1 on the offensive line. You also lose 2 on the defensive line. And you lose 1 linebacker along with 2 in the secondary. So this defense does take a couple of hits. But overall, I mean, I think this offense is looking pretty good if Terry Wilson or Sawyer Smith, if one of them can play well at the quarterback position and stay healthy, I definitely think this Kentucky offense can be good. I think that they'll be able to replace Bowden for his efforts. But as far as the defense goes, that does bring up a couple of concerns. Once again, I mean, when you lose 5 on the defense, I mean, it's going to impact this team at least a little bit. Brings up the question, though, will Kentucky improve in 2020? Really tough question right now, I'd have to say. I mean, once again, when you lose your quarterback in Lynn Bowden, which he put up a lot of insane stats as always, I think that he definitely, I mean, this Kentucky team could improve in 2020, no doubt. They've got the talent to be able to do so, and the recruiting class, honestly, is not that bad. So, Yeah, for this team to improve in 2020, it wouldn't surprise me, but I think, to say that they'll get up to 10 wins, I'd say would be a push, but I do think they'll hang right around that 7 to 9 win mark for sure. As far as your schedule goes, you start off the season against Eastern Michigan on September 5th. Then you got a road trip to Florida on September 12th, which that's going to be a huge test very early on in the season. That Florida team I expect to be very good heading into 2020. And then you got Kent State on the 19th, followed by South Carolina on the 26th. On October 3rd, you got a road trip to Auburn, followed by Eastern Illinois, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. And then in your November, you got Tennessee on the road, followed by Mississippi State, Georgia, and Louisville. So overall, your schedule, honestly, it's kind of different from last season. Of course, you started the season really tough in 2019, and you ended much easier. But for Kentucky, it's kind of the opposite this year. You start off the season with your easier games, and then you finish off the season with some really tough ones. Of course, they got two really tough tests in there with Florida and Auburn for the first couple months, but other than that, every single game is winnable. Like Eastern Michigan, Kent State, South Carolina, you got all of them at home. Eastern Illinois, Vanderbilt, Missouri, all those games are very winnable. It's just the Florida and Auburn ones are not going to be as easy. But yeah, once again, as far as your September goes, I think you go 3-1. I think you beat Eastern Michigan, Kent State, and South Carolina really easily. That South Carolina game could be tricky at first, but I think Kentucky pulls away in the second half. So I think you get 3 wins in your September. Once again, that Florida game, I just expect Florida to be too good for Kentucky to get a win in week number 2. If it was Florida towards the end of the season when you had more experience, maybe I would have considered that one to be a closer game, but I just think Florida, with them being at home in the swamp in the early parts of the season, and I expect Florida and Kyle Trask to be very good next season. So that game is going to be really brutal. I think for Kentucky, you do take a loss there. But you're going to be 3-1 through September, and as far as your October goes, I think that you go 3-1 as well. I think you take a loss at the beginning of the month against Auburn. However, I think you beat up East Illinois and Vanderbilt pretty easily. And then that last game of the month against Missouri on the road, that one could be one to watch out for. I think Missouri next season is possibly a bowl contending team. However, with it being on the road for Kentucky, that could be a tougher one. Of course, Missouri, they've got a decent home field advantage. It's nothing like LSU or Alabama, but they still got a home advantage. So I think that one will be a close one, but I think Kentucky grinds it out in the end. So yeah, with that, heading into your November, you're going to be 6-2. So you're already bowl eligible heading into your November, which is certainly very good for this Kentucky team. But your November is pretty tough. Once again, you got Tennessee, Mississippi State, Georgia, and Louisville, which I expect all 4 of those teams to be bowl teams next season. And especially one of those big sleepers next season will be Louisville. I think they'll be in the ACC. I think they'll be a big contender next season. They could potentially get up to 9 wins, I think. So, yeah, with that, I think that Tennessee game being on the road, I think Tennessee is going to be a great team next season as well. So I think that one's going to be a loss. I do think you beat Mississippi State at home in a close one. However, that Georgia game, I just think with them being at home, Kentucky could pull a big upset there. Who knows? With it being at the end of the season at home in Kentucky, that one could be a tricky one for Georgia, but I think Georgia gets the win there in the end. And then that Louisville game on November 28th, that one's going to be a nail biter for both teams. Both teams really need to win there, especially Louisville, because I think they've got potential to really be a contender in their division. So with Louisville being at home, I don't know. I think Louisville's going to get the win there. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be one of the better games pretty much of the entire college football season. That one's one that I'm really looking forward to. But once again, with Louisville being at home, I think that gives them a bit of an advantage. But in the end, I think Louisville gets the win. And once again, I do expect them to get right around 8 to 9 wins next season. I think they're a good team. And so, yeah, you got to watch out for that one. But still for Kentucky, 7-5 is going to be your record prediction. I think in general that is still a good prediction. Considering you're losing you're losing Lynn Bowden, who put up over 2,000 yards of offense last season. Considering that, I think that Kentucky, honestly, 7-5 is a pretty good record prediction. Once again, it wouldn't surprise me to see them get up to 8 wins, maybe get a big upset over a team, but still, I just don't think they're on their level of, say, Auburn or Florida to get to an SEC championship game next season. I just don't think the talent's there for them to be able to get much further than 7-5. But once again, it wouldn't surprise me if they would surprise a lot of people and get up to 8 wins or something like that. It wouldn't surprise me if they did that. But nonetheless, that about wraps up our prediction on Kentucky. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. If you enjoyed the schedule preview, be sure to slap a like on it, subscribe as well. Really helps out the channel, and I appreciate that a ton. But as always, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.